From the Sandhagen vs. Vara fight that started the whole fuss in the first place, to the snot rockets that some fighters refuse to control, it seems like Conor McGregor is fed up with the hygiene issues in the UFC. In fact, he had an entirely different reaction to the controversial fight. Let's just say there were some pretty high stakes in the final fight. That's when Corey Sandhagen and Marlon Vara were up against each other, with Corey taking away the split decision victory. But it was pretty controversial and a bunch of fighters had different opinions on it. While some were pretty impressed by his performance and how he dominated the first 2 rounds, others, like Matt Brown, claimed he was up for 4-0 and simply wouldn't agree with the actual scorecard. As for the Notorious, he had an entirely different take as he pointed out the snot rockets. Think about it, 1 Gollier of a spit and 2 snot rockets from each nostril from both fighters, and that was just until the end of the 4th round. Like, the fighters literally blew their snot on the canvas. And if you didn't know, the word Gollier is basically an informal Irish term. Basically, it's when someone's snorting snot into their mouth just to spit it out. And let me tell you, these UFC fighters aren't really allowed to spit on each other either. According to the unified rules of MMA, I mean, you gotta admit, it's pretty disgusting to say the least. Not only that, but there's literally no rule that lets them spit or snot on the floor either. But that doesn't stop fighters from doing it all the time. Basically, they do it to clear their nose if breathing becomes an issue at any point during the fight. But would you consider that a good enough reason for something so disgusting? Well, the former 2-weight champion proposed a rule change to end this horrible habit that's becoming a little too common in the UFC. He's asking for a point deduction. I mean, that's the only threat that's gonna work, right? Otherwise, these fighters seem immune to pretty much anything else. A point deduction is the only thing that's gonna make sure they're careful the next time they feel the urge to do something like this again. Having said that, it didn't take long before Conor suspiciously deleted his tweet. Which brings me to the burning question, is everyone gonna take this as seriously as they should? McGregor is gearing up for his fighting return as he's gonna face Michael Chandler soon. Now, there's no date set for their fight, but they're expected to meet in the octagon right after the season of The Ultimate Fighter goes on air.
Actually, I like Michael. Had a good little buzz with him yesterday. I've no issues with him at all. And you know, coaching against him, I'm interested to see his coaching style. He's more of an athlete type of a guy. Then I think I'm just going to slice through him. I think I'm a little too slicey for him than anyone else.
Until then, I guess you gotta wait. Not to mention the Notorious hasn't scored a win in over 2 years, and he's trying to push himself back into the world title contention by defeating Chandler. If he manages to pull that off, he's gonna be UFC's first ever 3-weight champion. Yep, that's a pretty big deal. And it's not just about the fact that a fighter like Conor's coming forward with hygiene issues at the UFC, but also the fact that it's a pretty disgusting act to begin with. I mean, such actions are seen as pretty lowbrow by society as well. At the same time, it's become some sort of norm inside the UFC cage, which isn't okay. Having said that, since McGregor hasn't pulled off any impressive performance lately, there's the burning question. Will his influence stretch far enough to make the rule change reality? I'm not saying they're gonna go ahead and impose the point deduction right away, but any form of rule change would help right now. I mean, this isn't even a crucial thing to do in the middle of the fight either. There's one simple way to control it. Just don't do it. It's not that hard. These are the same fighters who have their buckets, water, and a bunch of things set up in the corners. And they're allowed to clean themselves up in between rounds too, so if they really gotta do it, they might as well wait until the end of the round to spit or clean their noses. No one's saying they gotta do it on each other or on the floor right in the middle of the fight, right? Not to mention the number of times fighters are opened up during the fight, and that's something you can't really avoid because the fights can get pretty intense. So imagine what this could lead to. With these fighters cut open with injuries and whatnot right in the middle of fights, some pretty fresh wounds. How are snot rockets gonna play a role in all of this? It's like opening the gateway to a bunch of infections and diseases. So if you really think about it, Conor's raised a pretty valid point, and he's got enough facts to back it it up, and I'm pretty sure a bunch of fans are gonna agree with him as well. As for fighters, well, I'm not sure about each of them. Some might claim it's gonna interfere with their fights. Other than the fact it's absolutely disgusting and intentional, some fighters also claim to do it when it affects their breathing right in the middle of the fight, and they can't wait for the end of the round. And they're the same fighters who are gonna come around to go against the point deduction, especially considering the fact that a lot of fighters are also pretty habitual of this. So cutting it off completely, especially with the threat of points deduction hanging over their heads, isn't gonna be easy. Having said that, Conor isn't the only one who's been super vocal about this. Dustin Poirier also seems to be disgusted by one particular incident. I'm talking about the fight between him and lightweight champion Michael Chandler back in 2022.
Most excited for it. This whole card stacked, but that one's gonna be fun. Well, I think it'll last. In my mind, every time I play it over, I see it very similar to the fight that me and Chandler had. Poirier's technique, trying to outclass how explosive Michael Chandler is. The first round is so dangerous with Michael Chandler. Second round's almost as dangerous, and third round's not quite. So.
I mean, he even dropped the F-bomb because he simply lost it. Basically, Dustin was a victim of Chandler's classic blood smearing right in the middle of their exciting fight. At UFC 281, the UFC lightweight champion won his bout, but even before he could go on to celebrate his victory, he was pretty nauseated by what happened next. Chandler literally blew his nose on him and pushed his fingers down Dustin's mouth.
And I told him he's a dirty motherfucker for putting his fingers in my mouth and blowing his nose and just sitting on that championship loss. It hurts, but it drove me to get better and come in here and get the done.
And what's even more surprising is that he didn't even deny his action either. Instead, he said that it wasn't intended as some kind of disgusting message. Really? Because that doesn't really add up. Basically, Chandler said he was just trying to clear his airways right after Dustin mangled his nose at the end of the first round, and that led to a significant buildup of blood that he needed to get rid of. I mean, it was the same reason most fighters mention he had trouble breathing, so to get some air back in there, he needed the blood to come out. Sure, it was a weird thing, but he's gonna go ahead and blame it on gravity. Having said that, this isn't gonna make the whole thing any less disgusting for Dustin, right? And how many fighters are gonna do the same thing again and again? Covering it up with the same reason? Honestly, they might as well find something else to deal with it, because this is pretty dangerous too. It's only a matter of time before more people come in to raise the same issue. At least more influential people who can actually make a bigger impact. Either way, I guess you gotta wait and see whether this disgusting habit comes to an end or not. Until then, here's everything you need to know about Conor McGregor pushing for changes to UFC hygiene rules.